That's right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your live stream or podcast of choice. Man, it has been a while, and I'll be honest with you, I have been absolutely stir crazy trying to get Spectrum Internet to fix my connection. I have been unable to do this now for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and I had a plan. I have a presentation that I was ready to go with a couple weeks ago. We're going to do an open lines and literally had to cancel like within 10 minutes of that show. Now that's the graphic for some of you that you saw. I know that the chat room was a little confused and I don't blame you. I should have changed it and honestly wasn't thinking. I'm just kind of jamming on here, doing it while the bandwidth is good. Now I turned down the streaming quality, so to speak. I did a test. Thank you all to those who showed up for that test a few minutes ago, and turned that down a little bit. So I'm sorry if it's not as crisp as it usually is, but I hope that you guys can see me, hear me. Hopefully it looks okay, because I think we're going to have a little bit of time here anyway before my bandwidth yet again goes kaput. Spectrum says there are so many people using the internet here during the zombie apocalypse that it is hurting my upload speed. Download is actually staying pretty good, but upload has been really kind of killing me. So I've been itching to do this, and finally, I've got the opportunity. So thank you again to all those who decided to do the test with me. What I'm going to go ahead and do is just kind of jump into this. Now, here's how the live call-in streams work if you have not been on one and you are watching live. If you have, if you're listening on the podcast version and you're not aware of this, I do live streams on the Black Vault's YouTube channel. Real easy to get to, theblackvault.com/live. That will forward you over to the YouTube channel. That way you can go ahead and subscribe and get notified the next time that I go live. Of course, these then get dumped down into an audio version and then streamed out to where the majority of everybody listens to. But these live streams, I have a lot of fun with them, I won't lie, especially when I get to turn on the toll-free line, which is on this show. Generally, I keep you guys kind of kept towards the end. And with my bandwidth just kind of up in array here, and I have no idea how long this is going to last, once I put it on the screen, you can call it any time. Now, there is a little bit of a delay between the live version and when you call in, meaning what you're listening to right now is probably about 20 to 30 seconds into the past. So that may explain why if you call in, I'm going to put you on hold. I may be in the middle of a thought or something like that. You'll hear some cool music. Just make sure that you listen on your audio device or whatever it is and turn down that audio when I pick up that call. That's going to be a huge help to kind of, keep things clean and flowing. But I'll go ahead and just open up the lines and we can take calls throughout the show. And if nobody calls, that's okay too. I don't expect a ton of people just because I didn't advertise this at all. I started advertising it 5 minutes before I started. So that obviously is going to hurt the live stream part of this, but I got to deal with it. When it's the apocalypse, you just got to run with it and figure out exactly how things are going to go on the fly. I will say that I feel unprepared. I looked through this presentation a couple minutes ago, but I made it about a month ago. And so now I feel like, oh my gosh, do I forget exactly what I was going to talk about? Well, let's kind of find out here. So this obviously is the kind of the quarantine and chill episode. And you know what? Here's my first live blunder. I want to be able to watch you guys on that chat room. So you're going to see me kind of look all around, and I have the presentation on one screen. I've got 4 monitors in front of me for those who haven't watched before. So I may be kind of looking all over the place. That's why. But I want to make sure that I can. Yes, that's right, Philip. I am in the future. And I knew you were going to say that too, because it was written in the history books. So I want to watch that chat room. If there is any problem, put it in all caps so I can see it. And that'll be a huge, huge, huge help. So here is my first and only shameless plug. Maybe there'll be a second one towards the end. But thank you to everyone who pre-ordered Secrets from the Black Vault. That is out as of last week, and I have shipped out all of the pre-orders. I was overwhelmed by the response to it. I didn't expect it to be the same as the UFO book Inside the Black Vault that I published last year. And to be honest with you, it seems like this actually has had more of a response with the general public. So I am fascinated by that. and so honored to have you guys support the site and take a look at that book. So those copies have shipped. For those who did order it from me, you should have tracking already. And I did launch it with a shirt if you'd like to add that on. I've received a lot of requests because people buy books on Amazon. Admittedly, they are a lot cheaper than I can be. In fact, they're like cheaper than what I buy my book to resell at on some of their sales. So if you bought on Amazon and are interested in the shirt, just let me know. I'll give you, I don't really make really anything on the shirts. They're very inexpensive. They're not like $30 t-shirts. I think it turns out to be like $17.99 or $18.99. I forget off the top of my head, but depending upon the size. But if you're interested in them, by all means, let me know. I really do appreciate that support, and I can just go ahead and get those direct to you. So let me jump in on a couple different topics. So what I do in these types of streams is really just kind of update you guys on the bigger stories that have come across the Black Vault. You'll notice that I publish stuff all the time, and I really have documents literally on a daily basis that go on there, some of which are very much more popular than others. Also, some of which are much more controversial than others, and this is a prime example. Now, for those viewers of this channel, you'll know that I interviewed Jordan Sather not too long ago, one of the last streams that I was able to do when I still had the bandwidth. And it was, again, a very controversial episode, but it had stemmed from a Freedom of Information Act response that I got from the Central Intelligence Agency. You see the NSA seal right there, but it's the interview stemmed from a CIA response where I had requested information on QAnon. Obviously, a very hot but controversial topic. It brings out emotions on both sides of the spectrum, and I have been amazed at the popularity of this. I posted publicly that I was not, I believe my exact wording was, I was not into the QAnon thing, I think is how I termed it. And that's true. I'm not. Nor am I now. I wouldn't say that my mind has changed. But I let the evidence kind of guide where I go. And so what was really interesting about the CIA response, for those of you who missed that episode, was that the CIA said that they can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of records pertaining to QAnon, because if they did, it would be a threat to national security. Got my handy coffee here as I'm still waking up, even though my alarm went off at 4:45 this morning trying to prepare the day. So the CIA response was a little confusing to me, and I posted that response online, as I do with many responses, and was amazed that that post was, I wouldn't really call it viral, but it was one of the more popular, if not the most popular tweets that I've done, not only this year, but probably last year as well. Jordan Sather was one of them that picked it up, retweeted it, put his own comments. Quite a few other huge QAnon, what they call influencers, those that are following that movement, had retweeted it. So it was a big kind of deal. And the amount of popularity that tweet got intrigued me. That's why I invited Jordan on. And so we talked about QAnon. If you haven't seen it, I recommend watching it. Even if you think it's a complete bunk conspiracy, watch it. And because I allowed him to give that side of those that are the influencers in that movement a voice. And that's what I'm interested in for this show. I will invite anybody on and have an intelligent, respectful conversation with, simply to give my audience a little bit more information than you would normally pick up in a tweet or something like that. So that being said, that's why Jordan had come on to talk about that. The NSA connection to this, and I have not posted this, at least I don't recall if I did, the NSA is acknowledging that they have documents, but they won't tell me on what specifically, but it is on QAnon. They are not telling me on what specifically. Is it about who it is? Is it about the movement? What exactly is it? I have no idea. All I know, it's on QAnon. They will not acknowledge at this point how much information there is, but they did tell me they are reviewing it for review. So those that are into the QAnon movement, the topic, the quote unquote conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, the NSA has acknowledged that they are reviewing documents on QAnon and will release it, hopefully release it to the Black Vault. If not, I'll at least get the denial. 5x5 News. John, do a FOIA request to NSA. Ask specifically about Admiral Rogers setting up a team in ROC. You'll have to explain that one a little bit to me, and I'm happy to do it and pursue it. I'll try and keep a watch on the chat room to see the update on that question. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure where you're going with that. But here's another story that you may have missed. This is more UFO related, but also sticking with the CIA that I just talked about. And this was about a UFO document, specifically this one, that had been released many years ago. Now, this is one of thousands of pages on UFOs and the UFO topic. And the CIA, what you can do under the Freedom of Information Act is request what's called a mandatory declassification review, or an MDR. Now, an MDR is a great tool. So for all of those researchers, journalists out there that might be listening to this or watching this, what you can do is not necessarily request a Freedom of Information Act, request under the Freedom of Information Act, like let's say for this document, because what they will do is they will send you the copy as you see here. Even though it was last reviewed 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they will send this copy with those redactions. Now, 20, 25 years has passed. So the likelihood of all of those redactions still being applicable is sometimes kind of nil. Sometimes it does apply, but other times it's not. As long as there is a 2-year time span, at least from the last document review, then a mandatory declassification review request will make the CIA look at the original document and either release it or re-redact whatever they feel is classified. It could look like this, or they may release information. So what I'm doing is going back and actually finding those heavily redacted UFO documents that have circulated for decades, some of them for decades, others not so long. But as long as it's been 2 years, going after that material for an MDR request. The CIA is following suit on something that I am seeing as a growing trend. They claim they can't find this, that this is completely lost in their archive. That what they did was, back in the original year that this was released, probably somewhere in the 80s, I would say maybe 90s, what they did was they blacked out a copy of it, released that to whomever the Freedom of Information Act requester was, and then shredded the original. And so that original, which holds possibly more of the truth, what is going on here in Morocco about UFO sightings. And you'll see here in this line here, a personal request to investigate UFO sighted in Morocco. Why? This was September of 1976. That's a very important month for those of you who do follow the Black Vault. That was the same month as the 1976 Iran incident. So what is all of this? Well, to tell us that, it's generally in these paragraphs here, which are completely redacted. And so that MDR request, if they were able to find this, would hopefully reveal more. I have had success with this where they have revealed more about certain topics or events, even UFO documents. I posted a couple, but sadly we see this as well. So it's a very frustrating aspect to it, but you'll see that the CIA is, again, going on this growing trend. And why I say that is, here's a document from the National Security Agency, also heavily redacted, also on unidentified flying objects, also something that I requested an MDR review on. And what they said was that they lost absolutely, I'm afraid that it's going to start going here, that I'm having some bandwidth issues. I'm going to see how this goes. Chat room, let me know how this might be sounding at this point, because maybe I'll have to cut this. I'm getting error messages now. Only 15 minutes in. I was hoping for at least an hour. So I'm going to keep talking. Chat room, let me know here how this goes. So the NSA has said, hey, you know what? We lost everything. The only thing that they could find is a document that they call the Yates Affidavit. And what this is, in short, is that the National Security Agency, thank you, 5x5. Let me know if it clears up or if I'm just choppy and you guys can't listen, and I'll maybe just have to stop this. But I'll keep talking. The National Security Agency, back when they were sued, back in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe it was by the Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. Sorry, I couldn't think of the acronym. CAUS, CAUS. And they had to give the judge what they call an in-camera top secret clearance so they can essentially tell the judge why they were covering up all of this information. And so the judge was given this top secret affidavit, and the judge ultimately agreed with CAUS, with the NSA, and denied CAUS from getting the records because they felt that if they did release it, it would be a threat to national security. And so this affidavit is the only thing they claim that they can find. Now, I've done 2 or 3 MDR requests on this record over the last couple of years, last decade, I should say, and have been able to get more and more and more of it out. But this is the most recent release of it. And you can see that their explanation for hiding UFO information is still considered top secret and obviously still heavily redacted. So this is something that I still try and keep an eye on, but it seems like the fact that they lost all this material, that is one heck of a chunk of UFO information that is being lost. And that is a shame, because if what they are saying is true, all of that history from the National Security Agency standpoint is gone, all of it. And there are hundreds and hundreds of pages, which I haven't mentioned yet, that they claim that they have lost. The Yates affidavit is only, like, off the top of my head, about 15 pages or so. So they lost hundreds and hundreds of those. The CIA, I pointed out one. That's not alone. There are others. The next agency that I'll deal with, the Defense Intelligence Agency, they also have a pile of UFO documents. Here's some of them. Obviously still highly classified, obviously something that they don't want to release. Many years ago, I started my fight to get the DIA to, I'm getting differing. I'm not to derail here, getting differing things from the chat room. Some of you are fine with this, others are not. Let me see what this does real quick. Well, I'm going to try my best here. Let me see if I can turn it down even more, but I don't think I can while it's going. I'm sorry, guys. Let me know if it just gets unmanageable, and I will, maybe cut it and do this another day, and we'll splice it together and make one video or something. But let me just kind of continue with this one, in that the Defense Intelligence Agency, these records, again, being very highly classified, something that they don't want us to get, they are essentially giving me the same excuse as the National Security Agency and the CIA. They claim they couldn't find a single page, and there are hundreds of them. What's key about the DIA is that they don't stop in that magical year of 1969 when they say they didn't have an interest in UFOs anymore. The stream's getting worse and worse. They claim that they lost all of it. But they have these documents that, again, range from the 1970s on all the way into the 2000s. And so that's what's really kind of frustrating, is that now, again, given that they're not lying, you have the Defense Intelligence Agency with hundreds of pages, heavily classified on UFOs. Remember, a topic that they claim there's nothing to it, no threat to national security, if they tell you about it, yet here's proof that completely contradicts it. The DIA, everything lost, or so they claim. The NSA, everything with the exception of one document, or so they claim. The CIA, quite a few different documents, but it's a mixed bag with them. So it is really, really kind of frustrating when it comes to that. Here's another update. I'm just going to kind of keep going here. A lot of people are commenting that the stream's okay for them. Others are choppy. So I'm going to keep kind of plugging through here. I'm sorry if it is choppy. I can't see that on my end. I'm just getting warning after warning that the stream is bad. So I'm sorry, everyone. This is the problem that I've been dealing with. Okay, thank you, Joe. That kind of helps. You're not losing audio. So that's good. So why don't I just go ahead and kind of keep forward with this? So let me see here. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting segment that some of you may have overlooked, simply because this was kind of, I think, really kind of came out when coronavirus was dominating social media and mainstream headlines and so on. But this was my request, or requests, I should say, to the Department of the Army, seeking information on the agreement that they had with To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Now, obviously, that's Tom DeLonge's group, and he made headlines last year for stating that he was going to create a deal, or they created a deal with the Department of the Army to look at their metamaterials. Now, one of their biggest ones is the one behind this image here. That was the one that was tied into Linda Moulton Howe and her research and tying it into what are called arts parts. Now, I interviewed Linda on this very channel, and she kind of went into some of that detail, actually much of that detail throughout that show to kind of tell us exactly the origin of this material. Well, fast forward, now Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science has it, and they made a deal with the Army to look at not only that piece, but it sounds like other pieces as well. The Army's interest is the material and how it can help the Army, the military, and their ground units. What I went after was Dr. Joseph Cannon, who's listed on the agreement between TTSA and the Army. I looked for emails that would be internal, that we're talking about either To the Stars Academy, the agreement, what they call a CRADA agreement, or the essentially anything about the metamaterials is kind of the easy way to summarize it. So again, this was over the course of a few FOIA requests, and whenever I know that a topic is out there that I want to kind of pursue, I'll just dig in and go for everything. And really going for everything does not necessarily mean the press releases and even the agreement itself. I was proud to be one of the first ones. I believe that I was the first to post the actual agreement between the Army and TTSA. But for me, that's never enough. I want to know what they're saying internally. I want to know their communications behind the scenes, not to be nosy or get into corporate secrets, but reverse that. I want to know what the military is doing. I want to know what the military is thinking. I did get some new quotes from the Army, so if you haven't seen that article, I will put it in the show notes page, which is at theblackvault.com/show notes. If you're listening, if you're watching live, I'll edit this video when I'm done with it, and we'll have all those links in there on YouTube. But that's what I was going after. The end result was that they denied and everything, 100% of what I was going for, that they will not show me a single email. They will not show me a single communication. They will not essentially release anything other than the agreement itself. Now, I don't talk about this a lot. I actually think that it was a mistake to release that agreement, or at least a mistake releasing it so quickly. I am not sure. I'm guessing here, but it was so quick. I am kind of curious if the Army contacted TTSA for the release. I am not sure if they did. I haven't asked TTSA, so I'm not really sure. I don't think it's a big cover-up because I don't really see that there's any indication that TTSA is, I can't 5x5, by the way. I can't drop the stream midstream. I'd have to stop and start over. So let me see if I can do one thing here. If this helps at all. Yeah, it looks like it's kind of buffering for you guys. I'm really sorry. I'll ask again because it looks like it's actually rising on how bad that this is getting. So I may cut this because even on my feed here, I don't think that it's actually playing at all. So frustrating, to be honest with you guys. I was looking forward to kind of finishing this. So if the audio is still going through, let me say this, and I'll close it up after this topic. There was more I wanted to deal with, but I think that the amount of errors that I'm getting, I don't think that this is going to be... Yeah, Renee, so everybody's reloading it. Well, I'm going to see how this goes here. Yeah. Okay, let me finish the thought, and I'm going to end it because I just don't think that this is going the way that I would like. So to finish this up, TTSA is now the one that has to be in control of releasing all of the information. Under the Freedom of Information Act, the Department of Army has shut down everything for two reasons. Exemption 4, which protects what they call trade secrets and commercial or financial information. Again, you see that in a lot with corporations, corporate contracts, stuff like that with the government, because they don't want competitors to see how their competitors are doing, meaning essentially you're spying on creating a contract with the government, and they don't want that shared simply because then another corporation, a competitor, can come in, undercut them, create a different deal, a better deal, and then get the next year's contract or whatever it may be. So they protect all of those trade secrets and commercial or financial information. And then Exemption 5, which they consider disclosure of privileged communications within or between agencies. This is what's really, really interesting about Exemption B5, and it's frustrating. Exemption B5 essentially is exempted if you want to. That's pretty much what they call it. There's a couple different phrases for it, but essentially it's exempted if you want to. If you feel like it should be exempted, it might embarrass an agency, whatever it might be, Exemption 5 is the go-to. And so they'll just say, well, sorry, we can't tell you, it's privileged. Well, you can try and fight it, but it's very, very tough because it is this huge gray area in the Freedom of Information Act. There are 9 FOIA exemptions. 1 through 4 and 6 through 9 are, you can somewhat try and fight them with some exceptions, I should say. But they're pretty much clear cut on what they are and why you would get information exempted for that. Other than those 8, the number 5 is the one that you just can't sadly fight. And you can't know if what they're saying is true or not. So that's why they call it the Exempt It If You Want To Act. And it was in the headlines. I think Rand Paul ran into it, or I forget what senator ran into it, but an agency denied a senator's request under something and exempted all under B5. And I think Chuck Schumer also was involved in that. So it was like kind of bipartisan frustration that agencies were not giving out information. And I remember tweeting it out like, see, guys, this is why people like me are fighting to essentially redo and revamp Exemption B5, because it is exempted if you want to. So that's what the Department of Army said. And sadly, they won't release anything. So we are completely at the mercy of what To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science wants to say. I did reach out to TTSA. I do have quotes from them as well. They say that they are going to give us, the general public that is, the information when it is appropriate and in the appropriate time frame. I'm paraphrasing that, so please, I published all of their quotes in full, not only in the article, but also at the bottom. So you can see exactly what they said, so I'm not hiding or truncating or editing or splicing anything that they said. So you can read the article, and then the full statements are below. So they said that they are going to do it, but they do have stockholders to consider. So that said, I'll go ahead and see what they do. I'll wait just like all of us do. I interviewed also some investors, some TTSA investors in that article, and got their feedback. Are you happy with this? Do you think, this is the most pressing question for me, and I'll pose it to you. Put it live in the chat room, and if you're watching the video, put it in the comments below. Do you believe that if the military is partially or primarily complicit in a cover-up about UFOs, are they the right entity to allow to see what potentially could be the biggest scientific discovery of all time? Are they the right person to do that? That, to me, the answer would be no. And even though that they are bringing all of these resources and all of this information to the disposal of TTSA, as we can see, there's a lot of secrecy that's involved. And the corporation that is kind of entwined in all of this is touting that they want to end that secrecy. So there's a very conflicted, very contradicting situation here, where one side says something but does another kind of thing. And that's on both sides. Wow, it looks like it popped back into being an excellent connection. So I'm going to keep going here. That's good. So I'm sorry for those listening on the audio that I keep kind of breaking it. I was going to stop the audio stream, but hey, let's just kind of keep going. If anybody does want to call in, feel free to do so. I know I don't have a huge live chat room, but by all means, since the connection is back to good, let's go ahead and see what we can find out. All right, so a couple more slides. So this I'm getting asked about a lot. And this is a 2-page document that was broken by Vice News. The author is no stranger to this program, retired police lieutenant Tim McMillan. Got this from AFOSI, that's the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And they had investigated, sticking with the TTSA theme, the release of the gimbal video. And also the FLIR, and then also mentioned were the Go Fast video as well in this. In short, what this proved, which is kind of a head scratcher for a lot of us, is why would AFOSI be involved in the investigation of a leak of 3 Navy videos? We don't have an answer to that, at least not an adequate one. So that's a good tip there. And I'm saying 5x5, 5x5. Maybe I'm wrong on 5x5, but I appreciate that tip. I will definitely look at Speedify. Huh? Okay, so just want to write that down because that actually may be something I'm going to be looking into. So this document was given to Tim under the Freedom of Information Act from AFOSI, and it showed that they had investigated these videos. The question is why? And that is something that I can't answer, nor will I even try, other than create a guess, and that this is the guess. Is it Air Force technology? There's no reason that AFOSI would be involved in this. And the Navy has investigative arms. They have the Navy Criminal Investigative Service, so they could have looked into this. They have a few other branches that can look into this. Yet it was AFOSI, and I'm not entirely sure why. Now, it's interesting for me to see the interpretation of this document. I urge and push all of you to read the entire thing for yourself. It's only 2 pages. So I'll make sure it's in the show notes page and so on. I'll go over some of this here for the audio version, so that way you guys can know what we are looking at. Here is what the background of this AFOSI investigation was. This investigation was initiated on 22 December 2017, following the 16 December 2017 release of a video of 2 F-18 Hornets tracking an unidentified flying object to the New York Times news agency. The video in question, named Gimbal, was previously classified. It's crossed out, but if you look closely, that's an S/N as in Nancy F. What that means is secret, and then no foreign intelligence, so NF. And it was unknown if the proper declassification authorization was gained prior to the release of the video. Some blacked out names and subjects here. Those are exemptions B6 and B7. And then jumps forward. However, a short time later, he disclosed his involvement, in parentheses, to several news outlets, with the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which focused research issues on UFOs. Now, a lot of people are jumping all over this. Now, what does this tell us? Well, by matter of deductions, for all of you that have followed this story, I bet you all can figure out who that is. On screen, I'm pointing the pointer to the blacked out name. That would obviously be Mr. Luis Elizondo. Then it, later in the line, blacked out the subject line. I'm not sure why they would black all of that out, but that's just me, or whited out to be more accurate, but redacted. And then they talked about his involvement with the ATIP program and what he told the news outlets. I'll go back to that. Here's another quote. Prior to subject's departure from the DoD in October of 2017, so obviously this is just nailing the identity of who they're talking about, Mr. Luis Elizondo, because we do know that he retired on October 4th, 2017. That was given to me in writing by the DoD. He submitted a request to have 3 classified videos downgraded via a DD Form 1910 clearance request for public release of Department of Defense information. 2, it's a civilian, blacked out name, Defense Office of Republication and Security Review, Pentagon, Washington, D.C. That's also known as DOPSR. The videos were Go Fast, Gimbal, and FLIR. All 3 videos were classified S/NF, but that's crossed out. The downgrade request was submitted on 9 August 2017, but there was no indication the request was ever granted. This is key, because I got slaughtered by some of TTSA's biggest fans for this. Agent note, the DD Form 1910 was the form provided, but was not a form used for the declassification process. The DD 1910 is used for the public release of DoD information. The request for release, there was no indication the videos... Sorry, I'm also checking the chat room here for the audio. The request for release, there was no indication the videos, so that's worded a little incorrectly. The request for release, there was no indication the videos would be released to any news outlet. The reason for publication was listed as, quote, not applicable, not for publication, research and analysis only, and info sharing with other United States government and industry partners for the purpose of developing a database to help identify, analyze, and ultimately defeat UAS or unmanned aviation systems, aircraft systems, a couple different definitions there, essentially drones, threats. Blank, redacted, stated he would not have approved the videos for release to the media. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to stop there because, again, this is where I and the Black Vault was blasted for the original reporting for getting that DD Form 1910 authenticated, getting it released, then getting emails associated with Mr. Elizondo talking to Dopser, getting these videos reviewed. And I was told by many people on social media that I was an idiot and that I was wrong, and that proved that there was a public release. From a mainstream journalist who reported on this all the way down to some of TTSA's biggest fans and everywhere in between, that they said that did not mean what I said it did, which was U.S. government use only. And that's important because that goes completely against so many things that we have heard. AFOSI determined during their investigation, number one, it didn't go through the proper declassification channel. Number two, Dopser said themselves that they would not have approved the videos for release to the media. That means that stamp that Dopser puts on there, it all relies on what that requester is saying, I'm going to use this information for. And that's what I am kind of fixated on here, because this blows away pretty much everything we've heard about those three videos. Now, we do have some supporting, encouraging evidence, like the Navy when they told me that, yes, they are UAPs. That's great, and I'm not discounting that. But we've heard that these are the first ever declassified UFO videos released by the DoD. All of that is false. If you look at this document and you think that it helps the case of, let's say, Mr. Luis Elizondo, and I'll go back to that, then you have to look at the conclusions on everything. You can't cherry pick what you want out of a document and go, see, told you, Mr. Luis Elizondo documented was the head of the ATIP program. But then in the next paragraph, when it said, no, these were never supposed to be released, didn't go through the declassification process, I should say, and that Dopser said that they would have never approved it for release to the media, you have to take that into consideration and then ask the question, why are we being told that? Why are we being told the Pentagon said, oh, I approve this, here you go, New York Times, and that didn't happen? How many times have you heard that? How many times has that been reported? How many times has that been touted? That is in investment material for TTSA. That is in the media. That is in social media platforms, people blasting it out on their accounts. John Greenewald was wrong. Well, AFOSI decided and determined through investigation, where they have access that I don't, that form did not approve what we think it did, or at least what we were told it did. And that's an incredibly important aspect to this, that sadly, those media outlets that did pick up on this didn't really go into. Now, why is it important? Again, it goes to credibility. I'll get hate mail. Some of you in the chat room may hate me for saying it, but sadly, you have to look at that for credibility reasons. Why would the stories differ so greatly? The fact that AFOSI came into this, they are removed from OSD, they are removed from TTSA, they are removed from all of those, I would say, key players that were involved in this process within the Pentagon. So I would consider this as more of that independent investigation. It kind of sounds a little weird to say, but if you really think about it, if this was an OSD investigation and they sided with, let's say, the Pentagon, meaning OSD, and they contradicted Mr. Elizondo, well, you'd still have the split in belief systems. If they sided with Mr. Elizondo, people would argue, well, maybe that was a colleague of his or whatever. The fact that AFOSI from the outside came in and did their own independent investigation and looked at Dopser and talked to Dopser and looked at the forms and looked at the documents and talked to what I would assume by this is Mr. Elizondo as well, and they came up with this conclusion, that's really important. And so this solidifies that all of that heat that, again, not only myself, but others as well, that were saying, hey, look, that's not what these documents say, is not warranted. And I think that everyone has to look at this and digest it and consider what exactly does it mean. Additionally, blank never received confirmations the videos were declassified. I want to, again, this is an educated guess, but very much a guess. So I believe this is Mr. Elizondo as well. I do not believe it would be Dopser, and I do not believe it would be anyone else that might be mentioned here. The reason why this is important is, again, even though they were considered unclassified, there was no, this goes back to a presentation I did here on this channel. If you haven't watched it, I recommend to do so. I dissected those emails at great length, and you can see in the email chain that there was never any follow-up on whether or not the Navy gave their approval for a full unrestricted public release. And I believe that's what this is referring to. So I believe this is where they're saying Mr. Elizondo never received confirmation the videos were declassified. Again, why it's a quote-unquote educated guess. Dopser wouldn't fit into this variable because they're the ones that are making big decisions. The Navy would not fit into this because anybody from the Navy, I should say, would not fit into this as a variable because that doesn't make sense either. AFOSI would not really fit into this because, well, they weren't involved, as we know, from the email strings that were already declassified. So Mr. Elizondo is the only one that fits into that, into that variable. Here's the second page. On 9 March 2018, AFOSI Detachment 334, Pentagon, Washington, D.C., received confirmation from, redacted name, Unauthorized Disclosure Office. That's a new one to me. I've never heard of that. 1550 Crystal City Drive, Arlington, Virginia. The videos released by subject, again, Mr. Elizondo, to the media were determined to be this, if you zoom in, it's a U, so unclassified FOUO, which is for official use only. Blank, who I believe, actually, you know what? I'm not going to guess on who this is because I don't believe we can determine it. Blank name submitted the videos to blank Division Head Naval Air Warfare Center, Aircraft Division, Naval Air Station, Patuxent, I probably don't have that pronounced right, River, Maryland, who in turn submitted the videos to, redacted name, Deputy Security Manager. Yes, that is all a handful. F-18 Program Office, Naval Air Station, who sent the lead to the radar and EOIR IPT office. The result was no sensitive symbology or other items of concern. In essence, what they were looking at were identifying marks on aircraft, anything that could potentially be a threat to national security, get into potentially sensitive information, sensitive imagery, stuff like that. On 12 March 2018, Detachment 334 conducted an interview of, we don't know, explained the videos did not go through the proper channels to obtain their declassification, although the videos are unclassified for official use only. So let's focus on that sentence. I believe that this would probably be Mr. Luis Elizondo. It's a guess. The Navy in Detachment 334, then, which was part of AFOSI, explained to Mr. Elizondo that the proper channels did not get gone through. Mistake or not, I'm not saying this is malicious, and please let me stress that. I'm just saying that that is what I believe we are reading here, is that this was not done properly, but they acknowledged that the videos were not real sensitive. They're unclassified for official use only. You're talking about, you know, no security implication, national security implication if they're released. Could be because they really had nothing on them. They're fuzzy, you know, they're fuzzy objects. Let's be straightforward here. And so I think that that's why, in essence, there could be some reluctance to take action on this. And I think that that's really kind of, you know, something that you have to consider, because I got called out on that a lot as well. Well, why wouldn't Mr. Elizondo be in cuffs and taken away? Well, first of all, that wouldn't happen anyway, even if they determined that he did release inadvertently classified material. Now, if he pulled an Edward Snowden, that's something different, but that's not what we're talking about here. So I think what we're looking at is the acknowledgement, like, these were really low-level videos that did not have a classification or national security implication behind them. So what's, you know, really what's the harm? I don't read that in here, but essentially I'm saying it, like, what is the harm? There's really no harm. But as an investigator, you got to look at what are we being told versus what you can prove. We can prove something completely contradictory to what we're being told. That's why these documents are important. So Detachment 334 conducted an interview of, again, we believe Mr. Elizondo, or I would believe Mr. Elizondo, explained the videos did not go through the proper channels to obtain their declassification. Although the videos are unclassified for official use only. Blank stated, so this is probably the investigator, stated the videos would not undergo the formal declassification process just because they were inadvertently released to the public. Again, blank name, relayed there was no indication the videos were classified in the first place. Blank stated 100% of all F-18 videos go through his office for declassification and public release. Blank stated the videos which subject release, Mr. Elizondo released, never went through his office. Blank explained there were no identifying features on the videos to determine when or where the videos came from in order to find out who would have originally classified them. This made it difficult to find the exact video. Blank explained individual units kept track of their footage but did not keep every video. Some videos were kept for training purposes and some for situations such as subject or Mr. Elizondo's public release of unauthorized videos, then a big blank line. On April 13th, 2018, Blank contacted Special Agent, Blank, and confirmed that after conducting an official classification review, the 3 videos obtained by subject were confirmed to be unclassified. Blank stated the Unauthorized Disclosure Program Management Office considered the matter closed. Conclusion, AFOSI Detachment 334 considers this matter closed, will forward the appropriate documentation to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Pentagon, Washington, D.C. for action. So that is the document. I read it to you again for a little bit more of the audio version of this, but you guys can kind of dissect it with me and see where my line of thinking is. Then go back and read some of the news articles that covered this, and it's cherry-picked. And one of the big things here, and again, this won't make some people happy, they are glommed onto this here. However, a short time later, he, which again is kind of deduced as Mr. Luis Elizondo, disclosed his involvement to several news outlets with the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which focused research issues on UFOs. 2 things here. This proves Mr. Elizondo headed the program, that some people claim, by the way, that's what this document shows. And the second thing was ATIP was UFO related. Let's break that down. Nowhere in here does it say that he headed the program. It says that he was involved. So that's number 1. So the fact that there's vindication, I think, is a leap. So let's just say this was true, 100% fact-checked and sourced. That still doesn't prove that he headed the program. So again, am I playing semantics? Of course. But we can't leap to conclusions, and that's what I feel some people are. When it says to several news outlets, you have to know, when this was, written. Let me see if I could see. So 4/21/2018 was when this report was finalized and transmitted. Okay. Now, why is that important? The DOD was never pushed and asked, really pushed and asked about Mr. Elizondo's involvement. The statements from Mr. Elizondo's office, OSD, the Office of Public Affairs, had not issued their statements yet. Why is this important? Well, it's the same reason that me, probably many of you, and probably those that invested and probably into TTSA and probably those that were curious about it, never once jumped to the conclusion that Mr. Elizondo's role was embellished or fabricated. I'm not saying either is true, but none of us, myself included, thought that. We just operated off the assumption that he did head the ATIP program, and that in the beginning, I had operated off the assumption it was a UFO program. As time went on, I started to question that more and more, and that's a different live stream in itself. But the whole point is, when this was written, you could put an argument that the investigator was not going to start, looking into his background and looking into his claims and so on and so forth, because he was out there on the mainstream media in the public information circuit giving out that information. So why assume that you have to investigate that and fully dive deep into it when there was no reason to doubt it? The investigation were on those 3 different videos, not Mr. Elizondo's claims. So the fact that he put on there that Mr. Elizondo disclosed his involvement in the ATIP program and that it dealt with UFOs, well, he said it right here in the parenthetical to several news outlets. That's what he was saying. So my guess is the investigator who, and I don't blame him, like there's nothing that is here that's wrong, but it was never a doubt really in anybody's mind. I mean, maybe the hardcore conspiracy theorists that really thought like there was something going on, but not even myself, who was the biggest critic, arguably, of Mr. Elizondo's story at the time. I would have never guessed that OSD would say, no assigned responsibilities on that program. I never would have bet money on that. I would have bet money on other things, turned out to be wrong on quite a few of them, but there's still many unanswered questions, but I never would have went there. And I think that that's what we're seeing in this document. It's sad that I think that, again, many of this stuff is cherry-picked, where you look at paragraph 1 and go, aha, I told you I was right on this, but then completely ignore paragraph 2. And you can't do that. And you literally, on documents like this, have to take it word for word, line by line, and dissect it and look at it and see what it means. And I think that as my respect has grown for Mr. Elizondo, I have had many conversations with him now. If he is watching this, I am not trying to insinuate that he is lying. I've said that a million times, but I will say we can't just jump to, aha, this is proof. And anybody who's still asking those questions are completely wrong in doing so. I'll give you a prime example, and one that I'm going to try and see if I can pull this up here on the fly. But in the DIRD report, the DIRD reports were the ones that were created under OSAP. And under OSAP was, it depends on who you listen to. OSAP was essentially the contracted out portion of ATIP. And ATIP was kind of the umbrella project, and OSAP was something under that was contracted to Bigelow Aerospace. You also have another explanation that they were 2 completely different programs, so not connected at all, and entirely different. Mr. Elizondo said that in his statement, or in his speech, I should say. And Dr. Hal Puthoff gives a third explanation, which is ATIP is OSAP, but it was just a nickname. So whomever you want to believe, okay, that's fine. But just to kind of give you, like, there's a lot of unanswered questions here that we need to kind of figure out. So let's just operate off the assumption that they are 2 different. Well, I'll give Mr. Elizondo the benefit of the doubt here that they're 2 different programs. And so Mr. Elizondo stating that OSAP was something else, ATIP was UFO research. Let's just say that that is true. There have been numerous documents that have leaked out from OSAP through the Bigelow Aerospace part of all of this, and the documents that they created. Those are called the DIRD reports. We know the titles of all of them. Those were officially released in a Freedom of Information Act request. And then the reports themselves are still being reviewed for release. And hopefully those will be released sometime in the near decade. But that being said, here's a question that I will pose to all of you. Some of you, a select few, may know it off the top of your head. But who was the head of OSAP? Not ATIP, but OSAP. Who was the head? And if you can say it off the top of your head, kudos. I appreciate that for paying attention and your attention to detail. Don't be sad if you can't. Let me put this up. Dr. James T. Lukatsky was the head of the OSAP program within the Defense Intelligence Agency. We know that because his name was on every single document that leaked out. This is one of those DIRD reports. This was the cover page, unclassified for official use only. So again, these were not considered highly sensitive documents. This particular one was written by Dr. Puthoff. In case anybody's fact checking me, it's the Advanced Space Propulsion based on vacuum space-time metric engineering. They delivered their reports to the director of the OSAP program. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because every document that came out of the DIRDs, and there's like 5 or 6 that have been leaked out. Most recently, there was a version that was of the tissue study that was leaked out through Tim McMillan's article. I don't know who the source of that was, who gave that to him. I don't know if he, I don't want to make a mistake. I believe it was anonymous. That's how I remember it. I don't think he was able to source it, but if he did, apologies. I'm not trying to give incorrect information. I just don't want to guess and then be wrong. So I'm fairly confident he got it from an anonymous source. It was not disputed, meaning like nobody doesn't think that that's a report. It just doesn't have the, it just doesn't have the cover page. So that's like the only exception to this, that I can't say James Lukatsky does appear on all of them. It's just because that one doesn't have the DIRD cover sheets. It was just the paper itself. Other than that, 100% of them have James Lukatsky's name. I want to see a document that leaked, because apparently there's a lot of civs out there that are leaking these documents to George Knapp, to Tim McMillan, to these journalists who are covering this. I'm less concerned right now about who those anonymous sources are. More concerned is, why haven't we seen a document that says something like this, but with Mr. Elizondo's name instead? Because if OSAP and ATIP were pretty much the same, just with different scopes, meaning some are arguing OSAP was all paranormal, which I have huge, huge doubts about, but some out there are claiming that OSAP was all the paranormal, ATIP was the UFO. So if that's true, I don't see the paranormal part of OSAP, but regardless, these documents exist with director names on them. So I think that it's plausible that there's records from Mr. Elizondo, that if he headed it from 2010 to 2012 when it was funded, and arguably to 2017 when he was doing it kind of in the shadows and taking money from this budget or this line item or whatever and sliding it over, which is how I believe he explained it. There's got to be something. That Harry Reid letter. I'm sorry, I have dissected that before. I won't get into it. But there's a very plausible explanation on why Mr. Elizondo's name would be on that. And I've gone through that. It's also on this channel, yet we don't have a single document. So going back to, again, the slideshow and what this kind of says, be careful who you're listening to and what you're reading. I always recommend, even with me, you don't have to believe what I say. Just go in there and read the document itself and use logic and common sense and kind of see what happens and see if you come to the same conclusion as some of the researchers, journalists, and social media influencers and in the UFO world, if you come to the same conclusion. If you do, awesome. If you still have more questions, then you and I are probably going to get along a lot better than you might think, because I think that there's a lot of unanswered questions and we shouldn't read too much into it. So that's really kind of it. That is the presentation, at least. I am totally open to any phone calls or anything like that for those who are watching live. The one thing I did not check was the text messages. So let me see if I had to get a new phone. Last Friday was my birthday. And I accidentally, in my quarantine birthday, had to drop my phone and shatter it. So I have not had my new phone set up yet to where I have the app. But let me see if I can log in a different way. And I do have some in here. So Brennan, shout out to Brennan. Let me move this to here. Brennan, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly when you sent this in, but I do appreciate it. I wasn't ignoring you. I just didn't have the screen up. Can you tell when you get responses to declassification reviews that they're hiding something? Or have you ever got a denial that you could tell was complete BS? It's Brennan, by the way. Hi, Brennan. So other than gut feelings, because you get the responses when you get like mandatory declassification reviews, it's really kind of easy to assume and fall into well, that's got to be BS. They've got to be lying to me. They have to be telling me something that isn't true. It's easy to fall into that. Sadly, though, it's not what you can think. It's about what you can prove. And so for me, if I do want to call them out on that and do an appeal, I have to have grounds for it. And that's what's really bad about mandatory declassification reviews and something like the CIA, where they say, hey, sorry, we lost it. Well, how do you fight that? You go, listen here, meanie CIA, I know you have it. Well, you can't do that. You got to say, well, for reasons X, Y, and Z, this is why I believe you have it, and do an appeal that way. And that's a tough one. I'm going to be honest with you. So yeah, you have to separate your personal, hey, that's BS feelings, which happen a lot. I mean, you get that kind of gut feeling that they're just lying to you. You have to separate yourself from that and go, what can I prove? What can I use in a Freedom of Information Act appeal, or an appeal thank you, Renee, for that happy birthday wish. What can I use in a mandatory declassification review appeal, or, what can I do to prove that they are lying or wrong? Because a lot of times, I will say this, I always use the lying word reluctantly, but when you get a denial, and sometimes it's not entirely true, you have to understand that they are human just like me. I make mistakes all the time. You can ask my wife. She's got like books and reams of them. She saves them. How she remembers all of them, I'm not really sure, but I make a lot. They are the same way. So I try not to, even if I do catch them in a lie, just completely be accusatory and say, hey, you know what? You're a big, bad, meanie liar, and you're BSing all of us, so how dare you? I try not to go there. I do try and just operate like they are human. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was an oversight. A lot of times, too, agencies don't exactly know how to process the FOIA requests. That sounds mean, but I mean, I've done 9,500 of these things, not including follow-ups. You kind of get versed in how it's supposed to go. And a lot of times there are agencies that do 100 in a 5-year span, I mean, the very small ones, but they'll do very, very few requests. So when something comes in, it's like, how do I do this? And there have been times where I've assisted them in essentially like what's the next step, like where can we forward this to, or work with them one-on-one. So long-winded way of answering your question, but I think that you just have to operate off of that. It's not what I can think. It's not what I can say. It's what I can prove. And you'll see that I use that analogy with a lot of things that I pursue and a lot of things that I do, just simply because it's tough to separate it sometimes, but a lot of times you do get that feeling, but you just can't go there. So I don't recommend people doing it, and it's unhealthy too. I see it on social media. It's like it's a funny expression. But how do you know a politician's lying? His lips are moving. And although I think that that's funny, that's very dangerous to be in, because then you just get into a anti-government kind of state, and that's not what I'm all about. Here's another one. Here's from the chat room real quick. Captain Scamp, is your age classified? Yes, it is. It is not. I am 39, and I'm only bringing that up because if people do the math, and when I started the Black Vault, they could figure it out anyway. So sadly, secret's out of the bag, so I'm getting old. My last year, it's less than a year before I turn the big 4-0. I'm going to deal with a couple more here. I see that there's buffering and streaming and errors and all sorts of stuff. We're going to start a big campaign to get Spectrum to fix my internet here. All right, let me get another one going. Hi, John. This is Vincent. Simply to thank you on all of your work to get those documents out. You inspire me to use the AIA, Access to Information Act, in Canada. I was about to say, you must be in Canada, to see what mysteries lie within our government's vault. Thank you. Happy birthday. Late. Also got this. Superb. Vincent, in that book, so he showed a picture of inside the Black Vault. If you can see it, that would be this book here. So that was released last year, all dedicated to the UFO topic. Vincent, I don't know if you read the whole thing, but there is a chapter in there that I get into the Access to Information Act, and how the Canadian government has proved that NORAD was not telling me the truth about UFO-related documents, and showed me hundreds of pages on UFOs that the U.S. government said didn't exist. It's one of my favorite stories. Had a lot of fun writing it for the book, so hopefully you will get a kick out of that as well, being a Canadian and listening into the U.S. government secrets. So I'm a kid, Valiant Stallion. Yes, thank you. I still act like one. I have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I feel like I relate better to them than most humans out there. Let me see if there's any others in here. Let me see. Chat rooms are always a little bit tough just because they're not moderated, so I'm not sure where the questions are. But, yeah, I haven't... Yeah, lots of comments, but I don't see any other questions. So if no one else has anything, I'm trying to think of what... if there's anything else that I can cover for you guys, but if not, I think I'm going to call it a day. I really appreciate you guys using the very kind of difficult YouTube stream right now. If you are listening live, I have no idea really what that's coming out to be. I know that the live chat room wasn't too incredibly large just because I didn't advertise this at all, but I really do appreciate the kind words, the happy birthday wishes, and ultimately kind of sticking in there with me, especially all of those Patreon supporters. I know it's been a little bit quiet. I see a couple of you in here. Thank you for that. For those who do want to potentially support the site on Patreon, it is very, very welcome. You can do it via the link in the description on the YouTube video or on the show notes page. Anywhere on the Black Vault has a Patreon logo. Even $1 a month really helps, and it's really appreciated. I know it's a little bit quiet across the board for me. As you can see, the bandwidth issue is something that's incredibly frustrating. So hopefully they're going to fix it soon. They keep telling me promises, but other than that, we'll see what happens. So that being said, I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Thank you so incredibly much. Oh, here's one more. Let me deal with this before I say goodbye, because this text message came in. 818 area code. You're in my neck of the woods. John, have you ever received a document by mistake? The government asked you to return and not use. What did you do? Guess who this is? Well, I have no idea who this is, but I'm going to have to look on my phone book once I get everything imported correctly on my new phone. Did I ever receive a document by mistake? Yes. I don't talk about it that much. What did I do? I did return it. I did not publish it. I don't agree with it. It's occurred a couple times, and I don't see any reason. If people dig hard enough, they'd be able to find this throughout government agencies. But in short, it's happened 3 times. Classified information has come my way, 2 of which actually were classified, 1 of which was exempted. It was a mistake. I gave it all back. In fact, offered to shred it, so I didn't put it in the mail, and they actually asked for it back, which was fine, and I complied. So I just decided to go ahead and send it back. I don't like the Julian Assange thing or anything like that. All right, so caller, you're live on the air. Who's this?
Hi, my name is Jim.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for calling in. I always question whether or not anybody wants to do that, since we're live in kind of a small chat room this time, because I didn't really advertise the show. But thanks for doing that. What can I do for you?
I wanted to know your thoughts on the possibility that these aircraft that we're seeing in the gimbal video and the Tic Tac are actually ours. I don't know if you remember the story about in Popular Mechanics, they were talking about some patents that were submitted and approved. And to me, these vehicles look very, very similar to what we're seeing, and that there's a lot of disinformation out there trying to make it look like they're alien and alien craft, but they're not, that they're actually ours.
Well, that's one of the most interesting things about the fact that AFOSI, or the Air Force Office of Special Investigation, was involved in the, the FLIR video or the Tic Tac and so on. The question mark is why the Air Force? If those are taken by the F-18s and they were part of the USS Nimitz strike group, obviously Navy across the board, why would Air Force be involved? Except that matter of deduction was this Air Force technology. Now, they didn't conclude that in the report, so I do want to make that clear. Even though that might be a plausible explanation, They didn't say this was, classified Air Force technology. They just determined that the videos were unclassified. I just kind of want to keep digging on that and see. So to your question on whether or not that this is our technology, I'm going to sound like a skeptic here, but say that, yeah, I lean towards that. I do lean towards the fact that, yes, I believe that this would be highly advanced technology that was potentially tested on our own strongest Navy in the world, and essentially just kind of seen like what can it do, what the capabilities are. Can F-18 pilots, the best of the best, catch it, intercept it, and so on. The fact that the object had knowledge of, where they were going. Essentially, they had intelligence on what was going on. Really start to dissect, like, if this was an alien or extraterrestrial thing, would they really care? I really don't believe that I think that gives a little bit more credence to maybe a highly classified test. Now, I will say this to kind of play devil's advocate with myself. I pushed the Pentagon for an answer on that. Not could they explain the FLIR video that way, but rather, does the Air Force or can the Air Force ever test highly classified technology against the Navy without their knowledge? Because then you're playing semantics a little bit, but the Navy would consider them, if they were completely kept in the dark, unidentified, but the Air Force knew exactly what they were. Because it goes back to what Mr. Elizondo had put on the form to get these 3 videos declassified. And he described them as drones and balloons. And so then the question mark for me was Mr. Elizondo, who I would fully support and know that he has a high level classification security clearance, maybe he was knowledgeable about what these videos really depicted. And the Air Force really was knowledgeable about what they depicted, which is why they were involved in the investigation. The Navy did not, hence why they label them unidentified. And the Pentagon actually said that the Air Force would not do that. So I will contradict my own theory with the response I got from the DoD, though I still don't 100% buy it. I believe that if the Air Force wanted to test something against, let's say, the Carrier Strike Group Nimitz, that they would be able to, and not necessarily inform the Nimitz, as long as they are not putting anybody in danger. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, I agree 100% that our government is very capable of not doing the left hand what the right hand is doing, and testing their best against their very own best.
That to me is the most plausible thing. What better playground to test your toys other than against the most powerful military in the world, or the most powerful Navy in the world in this case. And I think that would make perfect sense. And I honestly thought the Pentagon would kind of see the light to explain this, saying, oh, yeah, well, they could potentially, as long as no humans were in danger, potentially do tests in the same vicinity or whatever, however clever wording they wanted to choose. I really thought that I would have gotten that type of an answer, but I was surprised to hear that they just shot that down, so to speak, and say, no, the Air Force would not do that. So I don't know. I think it's a great theory. It's not like the Pentagon has been caught lying before or covering up certain things, but I think that's definitely a plausible theory.
Oh, no, our government is definitely capable of lying and putting people's lives in danger. I mean, look at the experiments they did on prisoners and I believe some people with mental disabilities. They did experiments on them that were, today we would be aghast.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the technology and where we were, let's say 50 years ago, and how many decades a lot of this technology took to come out, even though and this includes the best of the best F-18 pilots, because sometimes people construe this as being disrespectful towards them, and it's not. They are the best at what they do. That doesn't mean that they are 100% knowledgeable about every aspect of every piece of technology that the United States military has as a whole. And I think that when you go against, let's say, a Top Gun F-18 pilot or whomever, and you go, well, this could have been something that you just didn't recognize, that's not being rude or disrespectful to him. All you got to do is look at our past. There was a time frame where experts, leading experts and people said, you cannot make a wing fly. You cannot have a flying wing. And yet for decades, the B-2 Stealth was flying, right? And it was obviously reality. And you would potentially see this thing look like what was Batman, the Batmobile of the sky. I forget what they call it. But anyway, looked like the Batplane. Batwing. Thank you. I don't know why I was drawing a blank there. I haven't had enough coffee this morning. But yeah, it looks like the Batwing. And people would look at you like, hey, that's crazy. There's no way that has to be alien technology. But the reality was we were flying it for decades before we acknowledged it. And so you look at that history. I often say history repeats itself. And I think that this is possibly what we are seeing here, that in 10, 20, 30 years or 40, my son, who will hopefully be into this kind of stuff, will learn, hey, back in, back during the Tic Tac incident, that was, this X-plane or this drone or this highly classified balloon. Who knows?
That's what they were seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's something that we have to consider. And that doesn't make us a debunker, doesn't make me a debunker or whatever. It just makes us logical, And then for me,
I mean, I don't see these videos getting out unless they wanted them out. I mean, if it was that, if they thought, oh my God, this is something we don't know. It's not going to show up on the news accidentally.
Yeah.
And this, this high level, guy is not just going to accidentally, release him because he thought he had permission. They're much smarter than that. And you don't get to where you were, in the government by being stupid. And so, from day one, I've just had a funny feeling about that guy and about To the Stars Academy that I just feel like I'm being spoon-fed some BS, basically.
I absolutely agree with you. So it's a fascinating topic. It's one that always makes me cringe when I talk about, only because I am skeptical on it, that I do lean towards that highly advanced piece of technology. And I'm always worried about what people think of that. But what can you do? You just got to look at it logically, and you got to look for those cases that you just try and shoot it. And again, pardon the pun, but shoot it down with every plausible explanation. And when it doesn't happen, doesn't work, doesn't fit, and it's unidentified, those are the ones that are fascinating to me. So
can I take a moment to share my UFO story?
Please. Yeah. Let's hear it.
Okay. So when I was 11 years old, me and my best friend were in our backyard. It was a very clear night, and we were looking up, and we saw a star go from one side of the horizon to the other. Then we saw another star move, and these two stars were doing these incredible, like from horizon to horizon, back and forth and dancing around each other and making V-shaped and square moves. And then from one of them came a smaller light to the other light, and that light blew up, and the other one took off. And we both looked at each other and just said, did you just see that? And he goes, yeah, that thing just blew up. Now, I will say this did happen when Star Wars, with Reagan was out, and it could have been satellites testing and shooting each other, possibly. Mm-hmm. But that's what we saw. And from that point on, I was like, wow, there's stuff up there that is wild.
How long ago was it?
See, I'm 51 now, and I was 11 then, so we're talking 40 years ago.
40 years ago, wow. Well, that's awesome.
It looked like two stars. And like, if they stopped, they looked just like a star. And then they would just from left to right and back in like faster than you could blink. Like, you would blink, it would be back and forth and making these crazy angles and just like, now my perspective, you know what I mean? They could have been closer, and so it looked like they were traveling further to me. I don't know. But how one made the other one explode is, I can't really explain it,
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's cool. I'm glad you shared that. So I archive UFO sightings in the case file database. So if you ever wanted to write it up, it can be anonymous as well. You can. I
did a MUFON report.
Oh, okay. I don't have access to those, but if you still have your writing and want to submit it, I'll be more than happy to put it on the case file map, and it stays public and free to everybody. Okay. So some of those other databases I know kind of.
Your website?
I'm sorry.
And I can do that through your website?
Yeah. So just go to theblackvault.com, and this applies to anybody who's listening. If you have a story you want to share, theblackvault.com, go ahead and enter the case files, and then there'll be a link to report your sighting. And some of them are investigated. I've got a team of people that help me through a project that I started called TBV Investigations. So, I don't know if you have it was 40 years ago, so I doubt you have a video, but, for those that are listening that do have videos or photos, even if you don't, it doesn't matter. They all go into the database, and where we investigate, some of the ones with evidence and so on, and kind of take it from there. So, please definitely submit it. I'd be more than happy to put it in there for you.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for, looking at this whole subject with a clear eye and not, going down the rabbit hole that everyone seems, these crazy theories and interdimensionals and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, let's stick with the facts and let the facts lead us to the truth.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it gets a little bit out there for me, but I appreciate the nuts and bolts aspect to your approach as well. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and you have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you. You too. And thanks for that call. There's a couple of different comments here. There was one. Let me see. Well, first, Eldon Sword, shout out to you. Thank you so much for buying Secrets from the Black Vault. Looking forward to getting some time with it. Order yours today. Thank you. I'm not a shill. No, I did not put him up to that. I'll PayPal you your money later. I did not put him up to that. So thank you, Eldon Sword. So somebody had said something on a comment I said. Let me see if I could find it. That's why the chat room. Here it is. Malcolm Lukeman, you're saying we already have crazy law of physics defying technology. In essence, doubting, my kind of lean towards classified technology. The answer is, in order for us to really conclude that we have law of physics defying technology, you have to prove that it was defying physics. Now, I've heard the stories about going from 30,000 feet to like 5 feet in like a split second. You really have to dig into a lot of those claims. And this is where I get myself in trouble, because you do have some amazing people that come forward with this, but you have to look at, this is instrumentation thing? What did they really see it? If they did see it, were they looking at the same object and so on? There's so many different questions and aspects to this. So unless somebody can truly prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that we broke the law of physics, we can't jump to that conclusion yet. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen, but again, it's not what we can say, it's what we can prove, and that is something that I have really kind of focused on. And again, it sometimes gets you in trouble, where you have to have that logical, common sense approach that this could have been instrumentation. This could have been, I don't want to say imaginary, because that sounds very disrespectful, but why doesn't everyone agree to the exact same thing that they saw? Why are there kind of differing views and explanations on what happened? And obviously I'm referring to the 2004 Nimitz encounter. So, you have amazing people that have come forward and that are talking about their experiences, but we cannot say based on somebody's testimony, this is absolute proof that they broke the laws of physics. It's like, I use the analogy, you put 4 people on 4 different street corners and have them watch the exact same car accident from 4 different vantage points. And I guarantee that you're lucky if you get 2 of them that give you the same story. So when you look at it that way, I mean, people are going to have varying degrees of recollection and how they recall things. And again, it is not what we can say, it is what we can prove. I got a text message about the buffering. I know, sadly, the problem is, for those who haven't been around for a little bit, it is buffering because I have horrific internet connection right now. And in fact, I am to that point where it's probably too much. The chat room has said that they can hear it. So people don't really want to see me anyway. And I don't have a lot of moving footage. So I've just kind of, did